But first, let's talk about the Iran war. US President Donald Trump's self-imposed deadline on Iran for talks is now drawing closer. His address is scheduled to be broadcast in a few hours from now. But as the world waits to hear what the American leader has to say, there is a lingering question on the biggest flashpoint of the talks with Iran, the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump's abusive social media post on Easter created ripples across the world. In the post on Truth Social, the American president lashed out at Iran, asking them to open the Strait of Hormuz, while using profanities aimed at Iranian authorities. The outburst is a very different tone taken by Donald Trump just days after his first televised address of the war, in which he had talked about the U.S. not needing Hormuz.
The United States imports almost no oil through the Hormuz Strait and won't be taking any in the future. We don't need it. We haven't needed it, and we don't need it. We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated, both militarily and economically and every other way. And the countries of the world that do receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage. They must cherish it. They must grab it and cherish it. They can do it easily.
The flip has now raised many questions on the trigger behind it. Pressure from both the geopolitical and economic corridors have emerged as plausible causes. In terms of the global supply chain disruption, Brent crude this week opened around $110 per barrel. Analysts estimate that supply losses have already reached 11 million barrels per day, creating what some describe as an unprecedented shock. In fact, that's $110 per barrel. Strategic reserves have been tapped, with approximately 400 million barrels released to stabilize the markets. However, this intervention is widely viewed as temporary and insufficient if disruptions persist. While it is true that America alone does not rely heavily on the transit through Hormuz, it is also true that the country is not immune to the impact from global disruptions. On the diplomatic front, meanwhile, there is growing calls for negotiations and a halt to military hostilities as the world grapples with the growing energy crisis. American allies are part of making this demand, while also choosing to stay away from Washington's call to join the war against Iran directly. Trump has repeatedly called on NATO and other allies to flex military muscle and force open the Strait of Hormuz. But 32 countries which have signed a joint declaration are willing to assist only after the war is over. As for Iran, the country has demanded recognition of its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have cleared that waterway is never going back to its former state, especially for America and Israel. Let me welcome on the broadcast Mr. Nader Hashmi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at the Georgetown University. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Hashmi, good evening. Welcome to WION. Can I start by asking you what you're expecting today in that address, the second one by the American president amid this war? Should we expect the Strait of Hormuz to reopen or some sort of settlement being reached?
I'm skeptical that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open, because this is Iran's biggest leverage over the United States, over world energy markets, over the global price of oil. Donald Trump is clearly aware of this, which is why he's flip-flopped so many times over this particular issue. Specifically over the weekend, his expletive-filled rant on Truth Social just sort of reveals how he has boxed himself into a corner over this war in Iran, not knowing how to get out. And so it's unclear what he's going to say at his press conference in a few hours here. It's roughly 10:30 in the morning here in Washington, D.C. At 1 o'clock, Donald Trump is supposed to speak. I suspect he's going to do what he normally does, grandstand, talk about this wonderful rescue of the American pilot, and then probably issue idle threats against Iran. So this is a very critical moment in this war. If Donald Trump carries out his threat over the weekend to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age, to take out Iran's civilian infrastructure, then we're looking at a major expansion of this war. Because not only will Donald Trump do that, Iran will respond by hitting American allies in the region. And really, God help us all if that happens.
Which is what I was coming to next. The big question right now, Mr. Hashmi, is then how does this move forward? What next in this war? Because as you're saying, perhaps Donald Trump is going to be talking about the big rescue that the U.S. forces have been able to do from enemy territory. And so what happens next? What should the world expect? A world that is already grappling with a severe energy crisis.
That's a great question. As I was driving into work today, I was just trying to go through the different scenarios in my head as to what could be a potential off-ramp that could bring us to a ceasefire, that could sort of lead to substantial negotiations. And all the scenarios that I could come up with, none of them were positive. I think what's really needed at this moment is some sort of intermediary that is respected by both sides and has the type of political gravitas and respect to negotiate some sort of first ceasefire and then comprehensive solution. I just don't know who that person could be. I mean, on one sense, it could be, someone from Russia, Vladimir Putin, has good relations with both sides. It could be someone from China, Xi Jinping. But Russia and China are actually benefiting from this war. They don't want to see the United States get out of this conundrum that Donald Trump has put himself in. They're actually benefiting from this. Possibly Turkey. Turkey has good relations with both sides, but I don't see, Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey sort of making any moves in this direction. So I'm very skeptical. I'm of the view that we are still in the middle of this war. The end is a long way away, and it's unclear how we're going to sort of get to some sort of off-ramp. I think Iran believes it's in the driver's seat, and it has Donald Trump boxed in, and it's going to sort of press hard to get some sort of grand bargain. But I don't see Donald Trump giving those types of concessions that the Iranian government needs. So I'm very skeptical that we're anywhere close to a resolution of this conflict.
So do you think, Mr. Hashmi, that Iran is indeed in the driver's seat, or is it all of this is public posturing?
No, I think they believe that the longer this war drags on, the fewer options Donald Trump has. Yes, they're suffering, tremendous blows to their military infrastructure, but Iran is winning global public opinion. It's mobilizing public opinion, particularly in its core region within the Arab and Islamic world. People are viewing this in the region. I'm not talking about the ruling elites in the Arab Islamic world. I'm talking at the local level. Many people are looking at this war through the prism of the genocide in Gaza and Israeli behavior in Lebanon. And domestically, the Iranian government has suffered a deep crisis of legitimacy. In January, it had to commit a horrific massacre because there was a major revolution unfolding. Now everyone in Iran is not focused on those protests and the massacre and the crisis of legitimacy. Everyone is now focused on this brutal bombing campaign that is taking out Iran's civilian infrastructure, hospitals, universities, educational facilities, schools, residential buildings. So, the Islamic Republic, I think, feels it's in a much better position now than it was at the beginning of the war. And it's going to try and drag this out as long as possible to get better concessions, hoping that Donald Trump will be forced to capitulate. But, that's a big risk for the Islamic Republic. So it's unclear how this is going to end.
In fact, one of the latest executions has been that of an 18-year-old in Iran who was part of the protests earlier. But like you said, all of that has perhaps been sidelined, and a lot of focus is now on the military and diplomacy, that is the military operation and the diplomacy that has been going on. Let's wait and see what Donald Trump has to say today. But I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Nader Hashmi, for joining us and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.